The ambitious music student, in their pursuit for musical knowledge, will travel far and wide in search of more exotic and dramatic sounding scales. For many, that journey ends when they discover Phrygian Dominant, the fifth mode of Harmonic Minor.
Hey, I'm Jake Lizzio, and in this video, we're going to be exploring one of my favorite scales, Phrygian Dominant. We're going to go through the theory on how do we build the scale, how do we figure out the chords. I'm also going to show you examples of where we've heard this in popular music, but more importantly, we're going to be talking a lot in this video on how do we use the scale, how do we be musical with it. So before you start this video, I do have two videos you should probably watch first. I have one on the Phrygian scale, I also have one on Harmonic Minor, and those two are going to go through the concepts of what is a mode, and they're also going to explain the Harmonic Minor scale. So I really do strongly recommend those as prerequisite videos to this one, but even if you don't know much theory, as long as you know this scale, you can actually make a lot of awesome sounding music right out of the gate. So let's get started. A Phrygian Dominant scale can be thought of as just a Phrygian scale, but we've taken that third note and we've just sharped it. So now it is a natural third or a major third as opposed to a minor third. And if I want to do that in the key of E, that would give me the notes E, F, G sharp, A, B, C, D, and E. Down those same exact notes. Now you can hear, just by going up and down, I start to get an idea of what the scale can really feel like. Even with just the tiniest embellishment, maybe just a hammer on top or on the bottom, you should start hearing that this has a very, very ethnic, exotic, foreign flavor to it. So our first application of the scale will literally just be going up and down it. But what I like to do is I like to pedal on my root note. So have our low note sustained, that's my E, I'll just keep finger picking that with my thumb, and then at the same time, I'll just start going up the notes of that E Phrygian Dominant. And you can hear you get a really nice flavor out of that, as opposed to just going up and down the scale without having a droned pedal note on the bass like that. And hopefully that should kind of evoke that imagery of the Middle East, and that's not a coincidence. I mean, this is a Middle Eastern scale. It's an essential scale in Arabic music. It's known as Hijaz, and we hear it in Turkey, we hear it in Egypt, we hear it in Indian music as well. A lot of Carnatic music has this idea of a low droned note with the scale being played on top, just like this. Now, I cannot play the piano, but I have never let that stop me from playing the piano. The cool thing about music theory is even if you're not like good at the instrument, as long as you know the basics, you can at least be musical with it. So I'm going to take the same idea and I'm just going to put it onto the piano. I'll drone with my left hand some low E notes. With my right hand, I'll just kind of go up and down this Phrygian Dominant scale, and it's going to sound wonderful. Now, we really don't need any more theory just to start writing riffs with this. In fact, some of the songs that I'm going to give you here don't include any chords at all. It's just the idea of going up and down the scale. For example, The Offspring has a song called Come Out and Play, and it's just the first 5 notes of the scale with a little bend in between. Also in progressive rock and metal, Dream Theater writes a lot of songs in Phrygian Dominant. Here's an example from the song In the Name of God. And Tool as well. The song example I'm going to give you here is 46 and 2. We're basically just in D Phrygian Dominant on the bass. But we'll talk about that song a little bit later. Right now, I want to figure out what chords are we allowed to play in Phrygian Dominant. If I start on my first note and I try to build triads off of it, I can get an E major triad. I'm also allowed to build an F major triad off the second note. Off the third note, I can make a G full diminished. Off the fourth note, I can make an A minor. My 5 chord would be a B half diminished or a B full diminished. My 6 chord is a C augmented, and my 7 chord is going to be just regular old minor. Now, all these chords are playable in the key, but the ones that I suggest you focus on are the 1 and that 2, the flat 2. So E to F, you should be able to hear there's so much tension just between those 2 chords. I also really like using that flat 7 chord, the D minor, in this case. So just by using those 3 chords, in my opinion, that's really all you need to develop that nice Phrygian Dominant sound. So maybe just give it a Latin strumming pattern. Here's my E, here's my F, B minor, back to E, an F, and then D minor again to resolve back to E. Now remember how we were pedaling over E earlier on? Let's do the same thing here. Let's take my E chord, and instead of playing a full F, let's just keep E on the bass, but have F on top of it. So we have an F major over E. And that to me is like all you need to know about Phrygian Dominant right there. That entire feel develops very well just between those two chords, pedaled over an E. And that sound is very reminiscent of like the fake flamenco that I do. A lot of times I'll do like just an E major and then slide it over to an F position, and you get an F major 7, sharp 11 over E. And if you surround that with the notes of Phrygian Dominant, so I've got like an E and then the notes of the scale, you get that cool like flamenco sound. You know, that's my fake flamenco. I'm not actually a flamenco player. I know a little Spanish guitar, but if I have to fake it, this is what I go to, is just my Phrygian Dominant scale. Now, one of my favorite usages of Phrygian Dominant is as a lead device, something to write a lead line or a guitar solo with. So I'm going to give you 3 or 4 examples and ideas that I'd like to consider when I'm using a scale like this, and then I'm going to wrap them all together and put them into a little guitar solo here for you. So the first idea I want you to think about is using arpeggios. As a lead player, I really like to arpeggiate the chord that's underneath. It helps me highlight the notes there. So for example, if my jam track is going to be playing an E major, I want to be thinking about using the notes of an E major as a lead player on top of that. And if the chord's playing F, I want to be thinking about using the notes of an F arpeggio. However, let's spice up our F a little bit. If I look at the notes I'm allowed to play, I can play more than just an F major. I can play an F major with a sharp 4. And I really like sharp 4s, that's a tritone. So I really like to add that into my arpeggios. What I've decided to do, and make it a little slidey, is instead of playing my arpeggio and picking through it, I'm gonna just slide through this arpeggio and make it a little bit more legato. Also, diminished 7th arpeggios. I love diminished 7th arpeggios. I did a whole video on them. And since I have a full diminished 7th chord in my key, I'm going to use that to my advantage and use these nice little diminished shapes. And even if it might not fit in, even if I'm not playing a diminished chord, let's still play the arpeggio on top. It sounds nice if I've got this low E and this climbing diminished on top of it. Also, pedal point can also mean returning to a note. It doesn't mean always a pedaling tone where something's underneath it. So in Phrygian Dominant, if I keep returning to a specific note, like E, my tonic, I could come up with a cool way to play Phrygian Dominant like that by constantly pedaling to my open E string, and I get some really neat little guitar lines like this. I also have an open B string, and B is a really important note in my E major chord, that's the 5th, so I could play through Phrygian Dominant and pedal to the note B just like this on my 2nd string, and that's a cool idea as well. Now in the solo here, what I decided to do is do it like polymetrically. We're in 4/4, but I wanted to do like a 10-note phrase, so I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And it kind of left me in between the measures, and then eventually I was able to sync back up with the 4/4 afterwards. And you really can't go wrong with just like going up and down the scale. This is such a flavorful scale, and I think that's really unique about Phrygian Dominant. If you go up and down Dorian, you know, not a lot of flavor is going to develop if there's no context there. You really need the chords behind it for the Dorian scale to sound unique. But Phrygian Dominant, just by going up and down, all that color and all that flavor starts coming out of it. So why not just go up and down the scale if you're in the middle of a solo? It's going to sound pretty good. And last but not least, I want to bring back the drone idea on my open E string by letting that open E string ring out as I'm playing E Phrygian Dominant on the other strings. And you hear that gives me a really nice like imitation sitar sound where I've got that high droning E. So if I take all these ideas, throw them together on top of a jam track, here's what it's going to sound like. Now that jam track is courtesy of Chus. He runs an awesome YouTube channel, and if you're into playing lead and improvising leads, I highly recommend you go over there and check it out. I have so much fun. Just click on any video, hit play, turn on really loud, and start playing along. It's great practice improvising over these different exotic tracks. Now, if this is all new stuff to you, I just want to warn you about musical malpractice. This is such an easy scale to use, and it sounds so cool when you first discover it. It's easy to overdo it. So I do recommend learning to dilute all of the real dramatic power of the scale. A good example of that is in the song 46 and 2 by Tool. The riff is in Phrygian Dominant, but after just a few measures, the guitars come in with a flat 3 instead of a natural 3. By bringing in that flat 3 instead of the natural 3, it really kind of tampers down the dramatic nature of this scale, and then they go right back to it in the following measure. So my advice is, learn to use this stuff sparingly, maybe doing sections in Phrygian Dominant or just little riffs in Phrygian Dominant before you go back to a parallel minor or a parallel or a related minor scale as well. But it can be a little much if you do entire sections in Phrygian Dominant, so just watch out. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do like videos like this and you want to see more, you can consider supporting my Patreon page. These lessons really wouldn't exist if it weren't for the fine folks over there who have subscribed to me. But if you can't do that, I understand. Just like, comment, favorite, all that kind of stuff helps me out. And I will see you next time.